Today's video is going to be a little different. This is going to be a bit of a recap on my campaign that I'm currently running because a player missed a week last week, and I thought this would be a fun way to remind them what happened. I'm running for them an adventure that was published in 1982 for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I'm not going to name the adventure because my players will have access to this video, and that actually might spoil it for them if they learn the title. However, the enterprising DM might be able to piece together exactly what adventure it is based on the information I give. Later down the line, I might change the title of this video once my players have learned all the secrets. But for now, campaign recap. Our story begins like any good story, in a tavern. One of my own design, the Sparrow's Head, which sits on the crossroads between a few different villages and towns. A fantastic meeting place for all sorts of adventurers, drifters, and wandering evil wizards. I rolled some dice to determine the order in which they would enter, and one by one, they introduced themselves. And in our party we have Rufus the Bard, Flint the Cleric of Light, Arthur the White Dragonborn, Nadar the Elven Ranger, and finally Einkel the Dwarven Monk. It began with some awkward introductions as they all realised they had all been asked to come here for the same job. They questioned whether or not they would all be able to do the job, or whether or not they should take it at all. They made some small talk with the owners, Meredith and Bert. A lovely couple, if a little overbearing. Bert is particularly fond of his famous trout. And for good reason, it's delicious. It was here in this humble inn that I presented them with all the different plot hooks and adventures that they could organically pick themselves. I stole this idea and a couple of others from someone else on YouTube. First one to guess gets a tin of beans. After a few ales, a tune in the lute from Rufus, and a little bit of a scuffle with some of the rougher folk who came in to cause trouble, the altercation with these ruffians led to violent outcomes. Both of them were killed in a fight after escalating the situation and drawing swords against the party. The bodies fell, the air grew cold, flames went out, the doors to the inn sprung open. A figure clad in red floated through the air, motioned, lifted the bodies up, and departed with them. A man, a wizard of evil intent. He gracefully floated out of the inn with the bodies, smiling the whole way. A few prying questions later, and the party were able to discern that this was the scourge of the Sparrow's Head. An evil wizard, a repulsive man by the name of Calrel the Vile. Calrel left something behind with the owners, a handful of gold, month's wages for some people, gold stained with blood that will never wash off. Thinking it would make for a good story one day and he'd like something to help tell it, Rufus took one of the pieces of blood gold, put it in his pocket. The party decided to help a young couple in the inn, Lucas, Helena and their two children. They were on the road having left their childhood home, seemingly forced out by something that made people in the town change. Something that made folk they had grown up with, known their whole life, not even recognise them. It broke their heart to leave, but it was a no-brainer. They had to get out of Orlane. They pleaded with this party of adventurers for help. They had nothing to give in terms of gold, only their gratitude. The group, of true noble virtue, turned down the paid work they had come for and took on this quest. The party rested up for the night, and in the morning they made their way on the Dawn Way west to the village of Orlane. And it's here in this simple village that our story takes an interesting turn. Now, the thing you need to know about the adventure I'm running is that there are forces at work against the party that aren't immediately visible to them. People who follow them, watch them, note down where they're going, what they're doing, and what number, and when. Now, in Orlane, there are two inns. There's the Golden Grain and the Slumbering Salamander. And the adventure makes a few different assumptions. It first of all assumes the party won't split up, and second of all are probably going to stay at the other inn. When my players arrived in Orlane, the first thing they did was they split up in two and went to the Golden Grain Inn, where the bad guys are. Blink, blink. I'd spent so long in preparation for this, trying to figure out the pacing of how to deliver the information in this adventure and when to have the kind of actiony encounters crop up. And they just walked headfirst into them. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. But it was fun. It's dramatic. Rufus the Bard, an alcoholic, and Nadar the Ranger, the guy looking out for the alcoholic, decide to go into the Golden Grain Inn. They are greeted with a dingy place. It smells of damp, it's not very busy, there's only one other guy there. They go to order a couple of drinks. The bartender asks them some very prying questions about why they're in town, and upon getting a sense of why they're here, decides to get the special spirits from round the back. He returns with 3 glasses, 1, 2, and 1 for himself. Pops a bottle of a nice dwarven spirit, 1 for you, and 1 for me. And at this point, in character, I went, cheers, with my players following suit after they see this barman take a drink. He waits until he's sure they've downed the drink, and then make a constitution saving throw, both of you. They fail their saves and fall unconscious, poisoned. They're dragged through the back of the inn, down into a dank cellar, chained up and robbed, left there to some unknown purpose. Cut to The other half of the party arrived at Anton's house. Knocking on the door, it opens, and they see Lucas, the man from the inn. Very quickly they cottoned on to the fact that this was Lucas's twin brother, Anton. They carefully approach the situation knowing that perhaps they can't even trust this guy, but in the end decide that he's not under the effect of this curse and decide to trust him. He tells them about as much as Lucas could tell them, a little bit more, giving them some directions and places to go in town, people to see. And in the end, the players ask about the Golden Grain Inn. Having just listened to me narrate how their friends were kidnapped, they learn that it's not exactly the nicest establishment and the one across town is much better, at which point they say thank you and be on their way. To the Golden Grain, of course. Upon entering, they find their friends are not there. They press the barman for information. Have you seen our friends? We're looking for them. We were sure they came here. No, nobody here today. Are you sure? I'm positive we saw them come in here. No, you must be mistaken. At which point, Arthur, the noble dragonborn fighter, places his sword on the table. I think there's something you're not telling us. I don't know what you mean, the bartender says, reaching down below him for an acid vial, which he throws at Arthur Frost, trying to blind him. Arthur makes his dexterity saving throw and manages to dodge out the way, the acid melting part of his armour, decreasing his armour class by 1 permanently until he gets new armour. This breaks out into a fight as the bartender and his buddies coming running from downstairs try to take on the party. Now remember that the party is down 2 people. They're only 3 strong, and the encounter I had for the Golden Grain Inn doesn't account for that, and I chose not to adjust that. Such is the consequence of the party's action in splitting up. The fight went back and forth, people throwing each other downstairs, crushing each other, stabbing, slicing, hacking, slashing. And the tide was turning against the party. They were really on the back foot. The dwarf Einkel was down to 2 HP, and at this point, as the DM, I'm maybe starting to regret not adjusting the encounter. Sorry. However, I had a trick up my sleeve. There were 2 elf NPCs in Orlane who were also investigating the same thing that the party were, and it says in the adventure that they won't trust the party unless they are in open conflict with their enemy. So I figured that with the party on the back foot and possibly about to TPK, now's probably the best time to introduce these 2 elves. An expertly fired arrow comes flying through one of the windows and goes through the neck of one of the bad guys. Another elf bashes his way through the downstairs door and joins the fight. All of a sudden, the tide of the battle is turned. With the help of the elves, they were able to overcome most of the bad guys, trapping the rest in a room, and were able to follow the dull sounds of yelling to a hidden trapdoor leading to a basement, finding their friends. Following the elves' direction, they exited the inn, peacefully, calmly, and casually, as though nothing had happened at all. I think I had them roll like performance or deception to see how convincingly they were able to casually walk through town, and they didn't roll too well. So I had this fun time being able to narrate the party tiptoeing through town like they were in a cartoon. Now we're in the elves' cottage, and they begin to grill the party. What are you doing? That was foolish. Who are you? Why are you here? Tell us now. The guys were a little taken aback by how aggressive and to the point the elves were. The party managed to convince the elves that they were on side. I mean, they'd literally just fought shoulder to shoulder. It was the elves who saved them. Begrudgingly, the elves agree. They explained they were asked to come here at the behest of Mayor Orlane, as her husband had been kidnapped. However, their investigation was lacking. They had been here some time and been able to discern about as much as the party already knew. Some key details the party had learned, however, were that people were taken at night, they were taken either out of town, or sometimes to the temple. When the elves, one of whom is a ranger, followed these people out of town, they became lost, forced off their track by some magical means, perhaps. The elves told them of an old cranky druid who lived in a grove in town, a man who seemed untouchable by whatever foes worked against Orlane. They had tried to get him on side, but he's a bit racist. See, elves in my setting are a fairly new race. They're immigrants from the south who had to move to this realm when theirs was ravaged by plague. And that's fairly recent, that only happened about 20 years ago in my setting. So in the region the players are currently in, the southernmost and poorest region, which bore the brunt of the immigration, there's still a lot of ill will towards the elves. And this cranky old druid is the personification of that ill will. And thus, they were now at a bit of a dead end, though perhaps you 5 may have better luck than we. Now go, we can no longer be seen together. The eyes of Orlane are on us. The party decided to make their way to the other inn in town for some well-needed rest. Einkel the dwarf was on 1 or 2 hit points, and Nadar the elf had unfortunately broken his hand. While shackled up in the basement, he tried to break free. I had to make a strength check. He rolled very poorly. I described as how he pulled and pulled and pulled, and the only give he felt was from the breaking of a wrist. It was pretty brutal to narrate, though very fun to act out, and his hit points had been lowered by 1d4 minus his con, I think. So they checked into the other inn, the Slumbering Salamander, which was admittedly much nicer and safer. The party had levelled up and went for a short rest. Rufus the Bard, now being level 2, was able to play a Song of Rest, allowing the party to regain even more hit points. Isn't that great? Later in the day, and after both some very nice stew and some of the nicest wine they'd ever had, they decide to head out to go see this cranky old druid, Ram. Now the adventure doesn't really give you anything on Ram, other than what his spells are, what his possessions are, and what he'll tell the party. I added in all the stuff about him being racist. It's a good example of identifying opportunities to weave in your own world building into these pre-written adventures which are set in other worlds. And the encounter with Ram was interesting to say the least. I had so much fun role-playing Ram. He was cranky, he was hunched over, he was shouty, he was sweary. He spoke in riddles and in circles, and it was hard to get anything straight out of him. He constantly kept leaning in and telling them of the charm on Orlane. Aye. Oh, you want to know about the charm, do you? Where did you hear of this charm? Oh, but there's one thing you don't know. The charm. At this point, my players are used to my shenanigans. We all had a good laugh, and they managed to get the information they needed, and were able to convince Ram to help them through the woods. Being a druid who had lived in Orlane for 90 years, nothing short of divine intervention itself would get him lost in his woods. They agreed to meet him in the dead of night when the moonlight touches the water's edge. And that's all he gave them. Druids. They headed to the lake in the middle of Orlane, figuring that's the best place to start if any. And true to his word, there was Ram, standing on the water, in the centre of the 10 feet deep lake. Ankle the dwarf decided to quickly test the water to see if he would go through as well. He did. And at this point the party's on the road to the source of the town's evils. The wilderness is a very dangerous, very strange place in my world. Anything can happen and any creature can come and attack you. They rolled for some random encounters and got some. Some were combat and some were not. During one player's watch they heard a twig snap. Going to investigate, they found nothing. The next night, during another player's watch, they hear a large, heavy thud. They go to investigate. Looking around, they find a large, heavy tree branch fallen on the ground. And nothing else. And on the third day of travel, they noticed the woods around them became gnarled, almost evil in appearance, thick roots sprouting out of the ground, a light mist covering the whole area. The going was hard until a clearing, a bog, a swamp that resonated some dark, evil energy. Ram told them, "This is the source of the charm." Struggling their way through the thick, heavy bog, they found a raised circle of mud acting like a dam, stopping the bog water from pouring in to an excavated site below. Going down to have a look, they see a hole in the floor leading to a set of stone stairs. Inkel the dwarf exclaims, "I'll investigate this," and heads down the stairs. Make a dexterity check. The stairs go down 60 feet and are thick with mud, water and slime. He rolled really high in his dex check and managed to keep his balance, shouting, "Mind your feet!" Arriving down at the very bottom of the stairs, he's confronted by a small wooden barricade and 4 men with spears staring at him. And that's where we left our session. Running this adventure has been really fun. Over the course of running this adventure, which was published several editions ago, I've learned a couple of interesting things. First of all is what players cared about in 1982 is very different to what players care about in 2019. I myself had to add all the kind of emotional and political hooks to this story. In the published adventure, it literally just kind of starts with, you're on the road to Orlane. It also does this cute little thing where it lists how much gold everyone has in their possessions in case you want to rob them, which I just think is really funny. You're here to save the town and you're robbing the farmers, and I don't know. It's funny, but it's interesting. Next week, my players are going to dive headfirst into the dungeon, which I'm really looking forward to running. I think it's a very well-made dungeon. There's a lot for them to unpack and learn story-wise while they're down there, with some really cool encounters along the way. I did this video because one of my players missed a session and I thought this would be a fun way to recap what happened. I kind of enjoyed that and I think I might do it again. It's a good way for me to reflect on what happened, and I just love telling stories. So, you know, the more I think about it, I think, yes, I will be doing this again. Please let me know if you've been able to guess which adventure I've been running. Very soon, I think my players are going to find out why I've been hiding the name from them. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have. I'll see you next session.